and he's going to house it.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football, sports betting, and most importantly, NASCAR home.
Yeah.
That is Brian Twining. I am Kyle Robert. We are here to talk some NASCAR, baby. I know it's only December, but we have championship odds. We have Daytona 500 odds, and Brian and I are here just to review the odds, give you some initial thoughts, some things we're thinking about. Our goal over the course of the short off season is to get a few people on, talk about the odds, talk about some drivers they'll be targeting in 2023. But we saw the odds, we wanted to hop on, we wanted to get some thoughts out there, get you some early bets, some things we're thinking about, some drivers we're targeting in the futures market, as well as look at those Daytona odds. Is there someone in there who potentially could win the 500, and all of a sudden their number comes crashing down and it's so much shorter? So that's what we want to talk about. Brian and I were talking a little bit. Futures market isn't the greatest place to leave your money. Like, if you find a value you love, you think there's opportunity. Last year, Brian and I both had Ross Chastain at 50, 55 to 1. Great number. Was fine sitting on it. Got to the final four. But you also don't want to like get in on somebody and have that number be stale all most of the year.
Yeah.
And have plenty of opportunities where you could be using that bet to get into other stuff and then come back and hit it. So we'll give you some thoughts, we'll give you some feelings, and give you some names that we like. But Brian, I guess let me just bring up FanDuel, because FanDuel and DraftKings are the two sites that we found some good numbers. If you guys find good numbers floating around, leave them down in the comments, especially if they're drivers that we mentioned that we're interested in. But I'll just pull it up and we'll just go from the rip. So Chase Elliott plus 550 on FanDuel. Very compelling, very interesting. I think there is a pretty good chance that he sits in the final four when we get there. The question is it worthwhile to drop, whatever 50, 100, whatever your units are, into plus 550, which, by the time we get to the playoff, if assuming he's in the final four, is going to be significantly shorter. But, do we want to sit on it? So there's a few names kind of inside, the elite group. We'll start, from 10 to 1 in. So Chase Elliott plus 550, Kyle Larson plus 700, which after last year, Larson had the season from hell. Things did not go well, but was still pretty okay.
Yeah. And he looked better late too.
Yeah. It seemed like he was figuring some stuff out with the new car. And your guy Ryan Blaney 10 to 1. So those are like the top four options. Thoughts, feelings, anything jumping out to you from that group?
I mean, just from a value perspective, I feel like all four of those guys those are good values. I don't think that investing for the duration that you would need to allow that money to sit in the sportsbook makes any sense. Especially, for instance, like you could go week to week and just bet Chase Elliott at plus 400 at a track that he absolutely dominates, and then parlay that the next time he's at those odds, and you're going to double your money, and that money is not sitting in the sportsbook. But from a sheer like value perspective, those four guys are going to be in the playoffs. Like I can almost guarantee those guys are going to be in the playoffs. Their odds are probably going to be similar or lower heading to the playoffs. And Chase Elliott's, for instance, were like 3 to 1 when the playoffs started last year. So, I mean, if you just want to get in on him early with the expectation we're going to see another dominant year out of him, I don't blame you, but it's probably not something that I would do. I hate locking my money up.
Yeah, and I think there's ways. So, like, you could bet him in a couple races, maybe, and then if you, instead of betting 100, you're betting 200 on him to win the championship at 3 to 1. Maybe he starts off a little slow and some other names win. Maybe a big name wins the Daytona 500. Maybe his number gets to 650. Of these four options, Denny Hamlin's the one that stands out the most to me. Was amazing last year. Even Blaney too. Like Blaney was so good and just could not win a race to get into the playoff.
All right. Hold on. Since this is the first show for 2023, I got to ask you a question. Over under 2.5 wins for Ryan Blaney in the 2023 season, considering how many times he was so close in 2022.
3 wins seems like a lot, but I think, we were kind of talking about this, and you guys let us know in the comments. Do you think we see another season where so many different drivers win a race, or do you think the wins are a lot more concentrated like we saw 2 years ago, where there's a lot, like maybe 5 by Larson, 3 by Blaney, 3 or 4 by Hamlin, Elliott wins 4 or 5? Like, do we concentrate on a handful of drivers, maybe a random, Chris Buescher or whatever, or do you think, the new car is very different, but was that it kind of leveled the playing field for a year, and now it's going to be a lot more like everybody knows what to do, and we'll see a little more difference, because the pitch of the new car was it's going to make it more wide open. It's going to give more people chances, and obviously year one showed that was the case. But I'm very interested to see if that was an admiration, or if that's something that year in and year out that's something we should be expecting.
Yeah, I'm under the impression that it's going to kind of regress to the mean, and unlike last year, it's going to be slightly more funneled towards like the upper echelon drivers, because no matter whether or not this new car makes it a little bit easier for teams that are not, at the same like revenue stream that of like the Hendrick and the Joe Gibbs, you have to expect those big teams have a little more money going into research, into just development and different schemes and different ways to make this car faster that those lower teams are just unable to do on a week-to-week basis. So I feel like we are going to get a little bit back to what we've seen in the past, where it's like, that upper group of guys are winning the vast majority of the races, and then you have just the spattering of more so at the super speedways where it's anybody can take it.
Yeah. I think I'm with you. I think it's going to be I don't think we'll have a different driver every week, but I think we will definitely still have a variety of people who win. The 12-1 range is wild and interesting. Obviously our guy Ross is there now at 12-1. Logano, the defending champ, at 12-1. Would not be crazy to see him go back to back. Chris Bell, already made my betting card. He is the first name. On my odds, I'm going to pull up our sheet to see. I think I got him at 14. We'll flip over and look at DraftKings here in a second. No, 12-1 is my first bet. So Chris Bell, we saw an amazing run from him last year, made tremendous strides, and I'm expecting that to continue. William Byron at 12-1 is a compelling number, and Kyle Busch, we're going to have some decisions to make on a handful of drivers that are going to be in new vehicles heading into 2023. And we'll start with Kyle Busch, who at 12-1, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'd rather wait and see if he maybe struggles a little bit, and maybe we can get a 15, and then he kind of figures it out when the new ride works. Or if we should just get in, go Kyle Busch is an elite driver. He's won titles. He's won a ton of races, and we should just trust him to be the guy that we've seen. Because last year, especially towards the end, was really frustrating
Yeah.
for Kyle Busch. But that was a really soured relationship. So I'm expecting a lot better results this year in 2023.
The one thing that I'm being cautious about with especially Kyle Busch is the fact that he's transitioning from a long tenured relationship, and he's going to a brand new team, brand new crew chief, brand new crew around him. Like they're going to have just this off season to get to know each other. I think you're definitely going to see some growing pains early. So for me, it's kind of a wait and then maybe fire mid-season if he finds his groove. But I do think that it's interesting where in the grouping that he's pegged in here, like I would much rather go to the board with Byron or Christopher Bell, just because they're kind of on the upward swing.
No.
Whereas Kyle Busch is, he's at the swan song of his career where he's reached the pinnacle. Like, I don't think you're going to see him just boom, come out of here and just dominate in the RCR car. So
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we get a Tom Brady-like season, though, where he switches teams and rubs it in the face of
Yeah,
JGR.
but the thing, I don't think that they're able to kind of monopolize the market the way that Tampa Bay did, where they literally signed all of the top free agents.
Wow. After the Martin Truex, I guess, makes the 12-1 crew here, which I don't know. Party Marty wasn't definitely looked like he took a step back last year and was kind of venturing, and he was almost to the point where it didn't look like he was going to come back, and now he's back, and um,
Well, and that's another thing, and that's another worry right there. And just to go back to Denny Hamlin at that 9-1, you and I had talked off air like a week or two ago, and I mentioned this, like, how focused is Hamlin going to be driving for JGR when he's now another year into car ownership, knowing that now they have a younger star in that second 2311 car.
yeah,
How far removed are we from him getting out of JGR, potentially driving for his own team? And then Martin Truex Jr., I know he's coming back this year, but is this going to be the same thing? It's kind of like the dead season like Kyle Busch had this last season. I mean,
yeah.
I'm worried about betting those guys, especially on the futures market. I would prefer to just go maybe, race by race, hit those spots where Truex does really well and see how he does early on.
Yeah, for the vets, I think Truex, Bush, and Logano, I'm happy to bet them on a week-to-week basis. But from a championship odds of the 12-1 range, it's Bell or Byron for me, and that's it. And Bell's the one that made the cut for me. So that's my initial lean. Obviously, we'll add names as the offseason rolls along, maybe even in season if we find numbers that we really like. The next range is where we get to have some fun, and we'll start with Tyler Reddick, who I'm extremely excited about for 2023. We saw tremendous strides from him, especially on the road courses. Like, this guy
Oh,
clearly figured something out, became incredibly dominant, and has the ability to excel on the mile and a half, and even in super speedways. So 16-1, I think, is a fantastic number. And I will actually take that. DraftKings had it at 15, but I will take 16-1 on Tyler Reddick.
yeah, and don't forget, he's driving the car that Kurt Busch looked absolutely incredible in a couple of times last year. So there's clearly speed there. And
Yep.
one thing to keep note of, Michael Jordan is probably one of the most, if not the most competitive person on the planet. So they went into this offseason, him and Denny Hamlin, trying to figure out how they can get this team rolling and competing week to week for race wins and a championship.
Yeah, and we saw Bubba look really good when he took over to try and get the Constructors Championship. So
Yep.
that was also really exciting, and I'm excited for that 2311 team kind of as a whole going forward. Right, but after Reddick, we have Kevin Harvick at 20-1. Alex Bowman at 30-1, I think, is really interesting. Obviously, it was a very frustrating season, including getting that concussion and missing a couple of
Yes.
races to the end. But he was able to come back and get back on the track for the final race, and get his, just get some comfort as we head into 23. So 30-1 is an interesting number for him. Obviously has the upside and has the Hendrick backing that you love to see, but I just don't trust him week in and week out to be a championship driver, at least at this point. But that number is very interesting. The next name on the list, Bubba, at 40-1. If we want to go team 2311, 40-1 is a great number. Like, maybe he
Yes.
doesn't cash at 40-1, but I feel like when we're sitting here talking in August, September, heading towards the NASCAR playoffs, that number is going to be between 10 and 15.
Yeah, this is a number where you kind of look at you try to prognosticate the season as a whole. And when you look at Bubba Wallace, you know how good he is at super speedways. So when you go into those super speedway races all 4 times, we're going to hit Talladega and Daytona and then the newly redesigned Atlanta here. So the 5 times, he's going to be among the top 6 favorites for that race. And all you really need is at least one win to get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then you have a shot there. And you get Kansas, you get Talladega, you get a Daytona race in the playoffs here. So I think that Bubba Wallace
runs fast.
Exactly.
And we have Daytona to start the season. So if he pops up and wins that race, all of a sudden that number is 25 or 20.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
So
feel
if
like
you like
he's like the
Bubba,
first
I
like
think you have to
smash
get.
future.
Yeah, I think if you like Bubba, you have to get in on it now. And I think that number is already moving because I think it opened at 50 when we were first looking at it. So it's already down to 40. It's pretty interesting. The other guy right behind him is a guy that we had 150 to 1 odds
Man,
when we
I
did the
was so
final
hoping he got
final
in
race
there.
right before the final four. And
Yeah.
it almost came to fruition, Brian. He was leading that race at the end, and that is Chase Briscoe, who might be a little more under the radar than people know, but he won some races. He got in the playoffs, and he was within inches of getting to the final four and having a legit chance at winning the championship. So 40 to 1 on Chase Briscoe. That is also on the cards for me heading into 23.
Yeah, and that one makes a lot of sense too, as I kind of hit on with like Martin Truex Jr. and then like Kyle Busch last year with JGR. When you look at SHR, they have two old fogies and Chase Briscoe. So I mean, where are they going to be putting the majority of their attention and focus into
Yep.
as a team for the future? It's got to be Briscoe. They're going to be feeding off of what Harvick and Almirola tell them. So I think that most of their stuff and most of their research and all that data is going to be going towards trying to get Briscoe elevated into the playoff push, not the old farts.
And I think having those guys and them just the knowledge that they have is going to be so impactful for getting that whole team kind of where it needs to be,
Yeah.
that I think it's going to be really beneficial for Briscoe as a younger guy to get some of that experience and some of that knowledge and some of that understanding as he kind of looks to build and get even better and build forward. Ryan Priest, welcome back to the full ride, buddy. 50 to 1 is an interesting number, obviously.
No
Been
chance he's on the
in the
future.
trucks. Yeah, I mean, I'm not betting it, but the fact that he is that interesting already means that we could be saying on my outright card, I will take Ryan Priest, which is kind of fun to say.
Hey man,
Daniel,
Daytona 500, Ryan Priest,
yeah,
sleeper bet.
yeah, Daniel, and we can look at the 500 odds quickly before we get out of here as we kind of build for it. Daniel Suarez had a really strong kind of mid-year and then kind of faded down the stretch, but learned some stuff. Obviously, showed his merits out on road courses. Has a lot of upside, and Ross Chastain was in the final four, so Trackhouse will be interesting, I think, again in 2023. So 50 to 1 on him, I don't hate. Cindric at 50 to 1. And once again, if you're into the could win the Daytona, and all of a sudden that number shrinks, he is another guy, had his first full year in the Cup Series. He's ready for year number 2. Probably learned a hell of a lot along the way. Makes a lot of sense. Cindric, Keselowski, Dinger, like we're starting to get into names where they don't
I
really have
was
a chance.
I was just gonna say the one name that I do think this is continuing the absolute disgustingness from the end of the season by me, but Brad Keselowski at 60 to 1, now that he's in his second year in this new car where he's part owner and all that stuff, like you saw snippets of him and how good he could be at super speedways in particular. So I think he's another guy who's in a spot where, say, he takes home the Daytona 500 or he wins, the Talladega race, or he comes back and wins the Coca-Cola 400, whatever that is, goes and wins the Atlanta race. He's a guy at 60 to 1 who could see these odds drop into like that 30 to 40 to 1 range. And then you could go flip it on one of those aftermarket sites. Like, I don't think it's going to get any worse than this. So I feel like if you do think that Keselowski has a chance to win a race during the regular season, I think this is a good spot to get in.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna pass, but under the same guise, Noah Gragson, in terms of talent, he's got it all. Between the ears, let's see if he can keep his patience, keep his calmness, and
Yeah.
actually put it to fruition. My guess is it doesn't happen in year 1, but 95 to 1 is interesting. Like I could see him being a lot more interesting than that number suggests, and it's a lot closer. Once again, I don't know if he'll necessarily win, but if that number is 35 in July or August, I can't say I'd be shocked.
on that, I wanted to ask you and get your feelings on AJ Allmendinger now on a full-time ride. Like we know how good he could be on road
Yeah.
courses. We know he could easily win at least one of those.
And we saw him take strides last year and be a lot more competitive week in and week out.
Yep.
I don't know that I'm quite ready to get there yet, but I like where your head's at.
I
It's
mean,
not a,
I'm just looking at his last 5 races last year. He only had one finish worse than 12th,
yeah.
closing out the season.
Yeah, he made tremendous strides. Like
And that was only one road course in that
if you
span.
wanted to take like $50 and put $10 on Dinger, $10 on Noah Gragson, $10 on Brad Keselowski, like I wouldn't hate
Cindric
that.
makes a lot of sense, I think.
And then you could hit a 1 or 2 up towards the top. I mean, that's a fun way to have some potential. And then you have a couple guys to root for to improve on themselves throughout the season. Let's go over to DraftKings and see what numbers they have. A lot of very similar numbers. Always shop it. Look at the different books you have. Find your best value. FanDuel has better numbers on Larson, on Denny, same on Blaney. A lot of these guys are pretty similar. Yeah. Like Dinger's 100 here, so if you like him, Gregson's 100 here if you like him. 250 to 1 on Austin Dillon. So if you want Michael McDowell, like we had a lot of fun with him last year betting him. I don't know that he's going to win the championship, but 500 to 1 seems mispriced. He should be up with these guys, but
Well, and then on that same like breath right there, just even going up to the 250 to 1 number and Austin Dillon at like that number is ridiculous for a guy who was in the playoffs.
Yeah. I think
And that's literally all you need to do is just get into the playoffs.
A couple $5 or $10 bets here, and then you can hedge your way out of it. I think is fun. Let's look at the Daytona odds and see if we can't find some values on interesting names. Obviously, super speedway, so the numbers are close. And we'll give you a full Daytona preview as obviously the week of the race, like we always do. We'll do our DraftKings stuff. So if you enjoy NASCAR content and you didn't take the ride with us in 2022, please consider subscribing, hit that thumbs up, and get ready for 2023. Brian and I are here each and every week, twice a week, to get you set from the betting perspective and get you set from the DraftKings perspective. So please hop on, please enjoy the ride and come along and let's win all the money because we deserve it. So Bubba, 18 to 1, really good price.
Definitely on the card. Like
it's why I'm on the 40 to 1 to win the championship. I think he can absolutely win this race. And I think that number shrinks, and I think I'll be really happy to get some value. Outside of him, don't love really anybody kind of flirting around with at the top. Is there anyone inside this kind of 20 to 1 number that really jumps out to you?
I mean, I would skip over every single person. As much as I love Ryan Blaney, and I do think he's due to win at a super speedway this year, the 12 to 1 number is still short at this type of race. I mean, we saw what happened last year between him and teammate Austin Cindric, who's the other guy that I would actually go with Bubba, both at 18 to 1. Cindric showed really well at these tracks last season. So I think Bubba and Cindric are like my 2 favorites.
I'm really curious about Stenhouse in 2023. 2022 was so rough for him. He really took major steps back, especially over the last bit of the season. He was a guy that always seemed competitive, especially at super speedways, and now he does not seem like he even like. I know there was some personal stuff going on. There was a lot of stuff going on at the end of the season, so there was no need to rush back. But kind of interesting at 25. Ryan Preece at 25 is fun. Could be a little bit interesting.
It's interesting too because Priest taking over for Custer, Custer was never really good. There was a few times where he popped, but I feel like that was just kind of because everyone else sucked.
Yeah,
and so he's in a decent car.
If he can elevate the car and see if he's a little bit better for what the car wants to do, because Custer, we had, like you said, we had definitely had points where we liked him. But he was not a super speedway guy, but Ryan Preece might be and might be better for that.
Priest is a guy when they release like the placement market, like top 10 potentially, probably get him at like 2-1 or something. I think there'll be some value there, but
100%.
on an outright, that's probably a no.
Jimmy Johnson will be running, which I think is interesting. Be curious to see what that looks like. Eric Jones at 40-1. I mean, he's just put him on the card, call it a day.
I do it, but it's like every time.
Yeah. Well, he just needs to learn how to finish those last 5 to 10 laps so he can actually win some of these races.
I mean, it is the Daytona 500, so you could already pen it down, or as who the heck was that? Andy Katz. You could write it in Sharpie. Chris Buescher is going to be on the card at a 30-1 number for me.
Yeah. Gil Wendis, another guy that I'm interested to see in year 2 if he can take some strides forward and be a lot more competitive. I'm like not going to touch him on the futures market, but I could see some spots where we maybe, even if it's not even outright, maybe it's top 5, top 10s, get some better numbers than he should be getting. I mean, if he's 100-1 to win the race, he'll probably be 10-1 to top 10, and that's the number I could find myself getting towards.
I think Austin Hill is somebody who's really intriguing if he actually races in the Cup Series 500, because he showed really well at those tracks in Xfinity.
Yep. There could be some value for sure. So, Brian, let's give the people the names that will be on our championship card, and then anyone you're probably going to put on your Daytona. If you want to put them on now, go for it. If you want to wait, that's fine too. I have 4 names on my championship outrights. I have Tyler Reddick at 16-1. I have Chase Briscoe at 40-1. I have Christopher Bell at 12-1, and I have Bubba at 40. I will probably add one more name to the outright card from the, like, Denny Hamlin is probably the name that makes sense, but I'm also not rushing in middle of December. I can probably get that number as we get close to the 500, so I'm happy to wait. Is there anyone you're going to put on your outright card to win the championship right now?
So right now I got 3 guys all at longer odds. I'm going to start with Bubba, also at 40-1 number. I'm going to go with Cindric at 50-1. Just kind of, I think he levels up from last year where he kind of surprised some people. I think he performed a little bit better than even I expected after the Daytona 500 win.
Yep.
And then the other guy, it's gross. I talked about it. Brad Keselowski, 60-1, just because I think there's a chance he wins a race this year and gets into the playoffs, and then that's something you could hedge later on in the season.
Yep. The goal is to have a nice little portfolio heading into the playoff and give yourself as many outs as possible, especially at good numbers.
I will say real quick, I will probably add a Ryan Blaney outright at some point in the season, but I think because of the way he performed last year and he didn't win a race, I think it's better to attack him early on race outrights, and then go back to the well, possibly at a championship number that's probably going to be 10-1, but after you already make money on him winning a race.
100%. We will be back to give you more future talk. Hopefully have some guests stopping by when the props get released. So like how many over-unders for some of these drivers.
Yeah.
That will be fun. We'll be back for those. Let us know down in the comments anything you want to see between now and January, February, when we really get ready for Daytona and beyond. That is Brian Twining. I am Kyle Robert. Let us know in the comments too. Who are you betting on the outright card? Who is going to, who do you like to win for the NASCAR championship at those current odds? We would love to hear. And if you find better numbers, please let us know. That is all we got for this time. We'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks for joining.